Chapter 1, Mishnah 6. The Mishnah cites 5 more statements that follow the same pattern. The first one contrasts the methods of slaughter for the paraduma, the red cow, and for the egla rufa, beheaded calf. What is valid for the paraduma is invalid for the egla rufa, and what is valid for the egla rufa is invalid for the paraduma. The paraduma must be slaughtered with a regular shechita, cutting from the front of the neck. But the egla rufa must be slaughtered with a procedure called arifa, chopping from the back of the neck. The shechita, which is required for the paraduma, disqualifies the egla rufa, and arifa, which is required for the egla rufa, disqualifies the paraduma. The Mishnah's second statement contrasts the eligibility requirements for Kohanim and Leviim to serve in the Mishkan and the Beis Hamikdash. What is fit for Kohanim is unfit for Leviim, and what is fit for Leviim is unfit for Kohanim. Leviim over the age of 50 were not allowed to serve in the Mishkan, and Leviim whose voices are weakened by age were not allowed to serve in the Beis Hamikdash. Kohanim, by contrast, were never disqualified for either reason. On the other hand, Kohanim were disqualified by physical blemishes, but Leviim were not. Thus, old age or a weak voice, which is unacceptable in the case of Kohanim, disqualifies a Levi, and a blemish, which is acceptable in the cases of Leviim, disqualifies a Kohen. The third statement contrasts the type of contact that makes earthenware vessels tameh with the type of contact that makes other vessels tameh. What is tahor in the case of an earthenware vessel is tameh in the case of all other vessels, and what is tahor in the case of all other vessels is tameh in the case of an earthenware vessel. An earthenware vessel remains tahor if a source of tumah touches only its outside surface, but an ordinary non-earthenware vessel becomes tameh no matter where it is touched. On the other hand, an earthenware vessel becomes tameh even when a source of tumah enters its airspace without touching it at all, but an ordinary vessel remains tahor if a source of tumah merely enters its airspace. Thus, being touched on the outside, which does not affect an earthenware vessel, makes an ordinary vessel tameh, while having something enter its inner airspace, which makes an earthenware vessel tameh, does not affect an ordinary vessel. The fourth statement contrasts wooden and metal utensils with regard to their ability to become tameh. What is tahor in the case of wooden utensils is tameh in the case of metal utensils, and what is tahor in the case of metal utensils is tameh in the case of wooden utensils. A wooden utensil cannot become tameh unless it has a receptacle that can hold things, for example a spoon, but a metal utensil can become tameh even if it is entirely flat, for example a knife. On the other hand, an unfinished metal utensil, i.e. one that can be used but is not yet fully completed, cannot become tameh, but an unfinished wooden utensil can become tameh. Thus, having a receptacle which makes wooden utensils fit to become tameh does not affect metal utensils, while being completely finished, which makes metal utensils fit to become tameh, does not affect wooden utensils. The fifth statement contrasts two types of almonds, the bitter almond and the sweet almond, with regard to the laws of terumos and maasros. What is subject to the laws of terumos and maasros in the case of the bitter almonds is exempt in the case of the sweet almonds, and what is subject to the laws of terumos and maasros in the case of the sweet almonds is exempt in the case of the bitter ones. Bitter almonds are edible and thus subject to terumos and maasros only when they are small, but sweet almonds are edible only when they are large. Thus, the state of being small, which makes bitter almonds subject to terumos and maasros, exempts sweet almonds, while the state of being large, which makes sweet almonds subject to terumos and maasros, exempts bitter almonds.